The sun was merciless that afternoon, burning through the sky like it wanted to erase everything beneath it. The earth cracked under its weight, the air trembling in waves of heat. In the middle of that lonely stretch of land, a young woman stumbled through the dead grass, her wrists tied together with rope that had cut deep into her skin. Each breath came short and ragged. Every step a battle she was losing. She tripped and fell hard, her knees scraping against the dry soil. Dust filled her mouth and throat, choking her until she could barely breathe. For a long moment, she didn't move. The heat pressed her into the ground as if punishing her. Then, through blurred vision, she saw something ahead. A broken barrel, half buried and splintered with age. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. This story gets much more intense, and I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Dragging her tied hands through the dirt, she crawled toward it. The rough wood tore her palms, but she didn't stop. When she reached it, she leaned against it, too weak to stand. Her dress was ripped, stained with blood and dirt. Her hair stuck to her face in sweaty strands. Flies clung to her wounds, her lips, her skin. She tried to brush them away, but her strength was gone. Her voice cracked like dry wood. "Please, God, not like this." Then came the sound that shattered the stillness. Hoofs. Slow, steady, getting closer. Her whole body stiffened. Her eyes darted toward the horizon. A rider approached, tall and silent, the sun behind him turning him into a dark silhouette. Panic shot through her chest, but her legs wouldn't move. Her body had given up. Only her mind was still fighting. She pressed her forehead against the hot wood and whispered, "Not again. Please, not again." The rider stopped a few feet away. The horse snorted, pawing at the ground. A moment later, boots hit the dirt. The sound of spurs followed, slow, deliberate. His shadow fell across her face. She turned her head slightly, eyes half open, vision swimming in the light. He stood there, tall, worn, silent, his face hidden by the glare. But she saw the gun at his hip, the rough lines of a man who'd seen too much. Her heart thudded once, then slowed into something hollow. "Don't untie me," she whispered, barely breathing. "Just do it." The man froze. Even the wind seemed to stop. The only sound left was the buzzing of flies and the groan of his saddle. He stared at her. The bruises, the mark on her arm, the dirt caked into her skin. He didn't speak. He just took off his hat, letting the sun reveal a face carved from loss and time. His name was Jack Callahan, 58, a man who had long ago lost the habit of caring, yet somehow never forgot what it meant to be decent. He'd seen death before. He caused it too, but this was different. This was cruelty written into flesh. He knelt beside her. "Miss," he said quietly, his voice like gravel. "You're safe now." She laughed, a broken, trembling sound. "Safe? There's no safe. Not while he's still breathing." Jack's eyes narrowed. "Who?" Her lips trembled, her pupils wide with fear. "Wade." Her head dropped, and she went limp, her breath a whisper against the heat. Jack caught her before she hit the dirt. Her skin burned with fever. He lifted her easily, her body light as a rag doll. He looked toward the horizon, empty land stretching into the glare. That name echoed in his mind. Wade. He knew it. He hated it. "Oh, hell," he muttered under his breath. "You picked the wrong man to ask for death, miss. 'Cause I ain't the one who'll give it to you." He mounted his horse, pulling her up with him, and turned toward the valley. The sun blazed behind them as they rode, wind carrying the scent of dust, sweat, and blood. Somewhere far away, a crow cried out. Jack didn't look back. Jack stood there for a long moment, staring down at the girl in his arms. The ropes around her wrists looked older than her fear, stiff and frayed, like they'd been tied too long ago. Her pulse fluttered faintly under his fingers, weak but still fighting. He carried a pocket knife, small and dull from years of use. With one careful motion, he cut through the ropes. The fibers snapped, and her hands dropped, trembling, the skin red and raw. She flinched when the pressure released, like freedom hurt more than pain. "Easy now," he murmured, his voice low, gentle in a way it hadn't been in years. She didn't answer. Her eyes rolled back, Her body went still again. Jack sighed. He'd seen this kind of damage before, the kind that went beyond bruises. The horizon was quiet. No dust, no riders. Just the sound of cicadas and the dry wind sliding through the grass. He lifted her onto his horse and climbed behind her, holding her upright as he turned toward the west. The ride was long and silent. Every few minutes she'd twitch or mumble under her breath. Names, maybe prayers, bits of broken thoughts that didn't make sense. Jack didn't press her. He'd learned that pain had its own language, and it didn't always want to be translated. By the time they reached the ranch, the sky had gone soft with evening. The old house looked worn out. Fences leaning, barn half collapsed, paint long gone from the walls. It wasn't much, but it was shelter. Jack carried her inside, laying her on the small cot in the spare room. He poured water into a tin cup and touched a bit to her lips. She stirred slightly, but her eyes stayed closed. The fever was bad. He could feel the heat radiating off her skin. He sat beside her, elbows on his knees, staring at the floorboards. He told himself years ago he was done saving people. He'd buried too many, some he couldn't even name anymore. Yet here he was, sitting beside another stranger, waiting to see if she'd live. When she finally opened her eyes, it was slow, like waking hurt. The first thing she did was lift her hands, staring at her wrists. She traced the rope marks, frowning faintly, then looked up at him. "You untied me," she whispered, voice rough as sandpaper. "Seemed like the decent thing to do," Jack said quietly. She studied him for a moment, suspicion clouding her tired eyes. "Why help me? You don't even know who I am." Jack leaned back in the chair, the wood creaking under his weight. "Don't need to. You look like someone who's had enough hurt for one lifetime." Her eyes softened just a little. She stared past him, the silence between them heavy with things neither knew how to say. "My name's Clara," she said finally. "I used to be a teacher. Back east." Jack nodded slowly. The word teacher felt foreign out here, too gentle for a place that chewed people up. "What were you doing way out here, Clara?" Her throat tightened as she tried to answer. "They said it was a school," she whispered. It wasn't. Her voice cracked, the truth spilling out in pieces. "They lied." Jack's jaw tightened. He didn't ask who they were. He didn't have to. He'd seen that look before, back when men did worse things under different names, under the flag, under the law. Outside, the wind began to pick up again. The sky had turned gray, heavy with a storm somewhere far off. Jack stood and moved toward the door, pausing just long enough to glance back at her. "Get some rest," he said. "You're safe here." Clara didn't answer, just pulled the blanket tighter, as if safety was something she didn't quite believe in anymore. Jack stepped outside into the fading light. The air smelled like rain and dust. He rubbed a hand over his face, weary from more than the day's heat. There was a name still echoing in his mind, Wade. A name that hadn't crossed his path in years. If Clara was telling the truth, then the devil himself had found his way back to Montana. The morning came too still. No birds, no wind. Just that hollow silence that makes a man uneasy before the heat sets in. Jack was out by the trough, filling it for the horse. The sun wasn't even high yet, but the air already shimmered like glass. Clara sat on the porch, wrapped in one of Jack's old shirts that hung loose on her frame. Her hair was still damp from the wash basin, her face pale but calmer now. She hadn't said much since the night before. Just sat there, staring at the horizon like she was waiting for it to take her back. Jack didn't ask what she was thinking. He wasn't a man who pushed words out of people. Sometimes silence was the only thing worth giving. By noon, the cicadas screamed through the heat, and the smell of dust mixed with something sharper, the scent of a storm rolling in. Jack lifted his head when he heard it. Hooves far off but steady, coming up the south road. Not from town. Not a stranger's pace either, someone who knew the land. He reached for his holster out of habit. The years hadn't dulled that reflex. The rider came into view, a woman, slumped in the saddle, her horse limping. She barely managed to slide off before the animal stopped. The moment her boots hit the dirt, she swayed, clutching the saddlebag like it was her last tie to life. Jack froze. It took him a second to recognize her under the trail, dust, and exhaustion. "Eliza?" She looked up, her face pale beneath the grime, her voice trembling. I didn't know where else to go. Jack frowned. Eliza Reed, Tom's wife. You look like hell, girl. What happened? She didn't answer right away, just reached into her bag with shaking hands and pulled out a small wooden box. She held it tight against her chest before offering it to him. I brought something. You need to see it. Jack hesitated, then took it. The box was heavier than it looked. Inside were papers, letters, names written in clean cursive, receipts, money, and one thing that made Jack's stomach twist, a folded page in Tom's handwriting. Eliza, he said softly, eyes narrowing. What is this? Her voice broke as she answered. It's everything, Jack. Everything Wade's been doing. And Tom's part in it. The words hit like a hammer. Jack looked down at the papers again. The ink still dark, the names of women, payment ledgers, routes, dates. It was filth written in black and white. I tried to stop him, Eliza whispered. I begged him, but he said Wade owns him now. Said there's no way out except death. Her voice shook harder with every word. I couldn't stay quiet anymore. Jack stared at the papers, his jaw locked. The truth of it settled heavy in his chest, the kind of truth that changed everything. Eliza, he said finally, voice low and even. You shouldn't have brought this here. If Wade finds out, he'll sin men. She nodded, tears gathering in her eyes. I know. That's why I came to you. You're the only one he's ever been afraid of. Jack looked toward the horizon, squinting against the glare. He didn't like being called that, someone to fear. But there was something deep in him, something old and buried, that remembered why Wade might still be afraid. Behind him, the porch creaked. Clara stood there, her bare feet quiet on the wood, her eyes wide as she took in Eliza, the box, the tension, the weight of what had just walked into their lives. For a moment, none of them spoke. The air between them felt thick, charged, alive. Three souls bound by fear, by secrets, and by one man's cruelty. Jack lifted the box again, his rough fingers brushing over the carved lid. If Wade's coming, he muttered, almost to himself, then hell's coming with him. The wind shifted, carrying the first cool breath of the storm. Somewhere far off, thunder rolled low across the plains. Clara stepped closer, her voice barely above a whisper. Who is Wade? Jack didn't answer. He didn't need to. His silence said more than words ever could. Eliza looked down at the dirt, tears slipping through the dust on her cheeks. You don't know him like we do. Jack's gaze hardened. I know enough. He turned toward the north, where the clouds were beginning to gather, dark, heavy, promising rain. And for the first time in years, Jack Callahan felt that familiar pull inside him, the one that told him he wasn't done fighting yet. The rain never came that night, only the smell of it, heavy in the air, waiting. Jack sat by the window, a cup of cold coffee in his hand, watching lightning crawl silently across the horizon. He hadn't said much since Eliza arrived. Neither had Clara. The three of them shared the house like ghosts who didn't know they were still breathing. Eliza sat at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug she hadn't touched. She looked smaller now, like the road had worn her down to bone and nerve. Clara moved quietly around her, wiping the table, tending the fire, doing anything that gave her hand something to do. You should get some rest, Jack said after a while, not looking away from the window. Eliza gave a small laugh that wasn't really a laugh. Haven't slept in days. Jack turned toward her, his voice softer. Then start tonight. You're safe here. She met his eyes, tears threatening to rise again. No one's safe, Jack. Not while Wade's breathing. Clara froze mid-step. The name cut through the air like glass. She turned, her face pale in the firelight. You know him too? Eliza looked at her, recognizing something in her eyes, the kind of recognition that only comes from surviving the same kind of man. He did this to you, didn't he? Clara didn't answer. She didn't need to. The silence between them said it all. Jack stepped away from the window, setting his cup down on the counter. His boots made a slow, heavy sound against the floorboards. Tell me everything, Eliza, he said quietly. Eliza took a shaking breath and opened the wooden box again. Papers spilled across the table. Names, dates, amounts, written in Wade's neat, careful hand. It wasn't just about money. It was about control. He owned men. He bought silence. He destroyed those who refused him. And in the middle of it all, Tom Callahan, Jack's younger brother. Eliza's voice cracked. He didn't want to be part of it, Jack. I swear. He thought he could stop Wade, but by the time he realized what it was too late. Wade had him by the throat. Jack's hands curled into fists. He looked down at Tom's handwriting, the loops and strokes that hadn't changed since they were boys. Tom knew better than to sell himself to men like that. He said he didn't have a choice, Eliza said, her tears finally spilling. He said Wade owns the law, the sheriff, half the county. What was he supposed to do? Jack didn't answer. He just stared at the page until the letters blurred. His jaw twitched, the muscle in his cheek pulsing with the weight of things he didn't say. Clara stepped forward, her voice trembling but steady. If this man controls everything, then fighting him won't save anyone. It'll just make him angrier. Jack looked at her, his eyes tired but sharp. Some men don't stop until someone stands in their way. Clara's gaze softened. And you think that someone is you? He sighed. I don't think. I just know I'm too old to watch good people die for nothing. The room went quiet again, except for the faint rustle of papers in the wind sneaking through the window. Lightning flashed, lighting up their faces, 3 souls bound by pain, by loss, and by something that still looked a little like hope. Jack pushed away from the table, walked over to his coat, and took out the old revolver that had been with him longer than either of the women had been alive. He checked the chamber, his fingers slow, deliberate. Where is he? He asked finally. Eliza swallowed. Last I heard, he was using the old church by the ridge as a meeting place. Tom said that's where the ledgers go. If you go there, you'll find Wade, or what's left of him. Jack nodded slowly, his face unreadable. You two stay here. Lock the doors. Don't light the lamps. If I'm not back by dawn. Clara cut him off, her voice breaking. Don't say that. He paused at the door, turned to look at her. I've been saying worse things my whole life. Clara's eyes filled. You think dying makes you right? Jack looked at her for a long moment. No, but maybe it'll make him stop. He walked out into the night, rain finally breaking open above him. The first drops hit the dirt like sparks. He saddled the horse without hurry, like a man who'd already made peace with the road ahead. Lightning flashed again, and for a brief second, Clara saw him silhouetted against the storm, shoulders heavy, head low, but still standing. She whispered his name, but the wind carried it away. Inside, Eliza closed the door, hands shaking. He won't come back the same, she said softly. Clara turned toward her, eyes shining through the dark. No one ever does. Outside, thunder rolled over the plains as Jack rode into the storm. The storm rolled in hard by the time Jack reached the flats. Rain came sideways, needling his face, soaking through his coat. The world had turned gray, sky and earth melting into one another like ash and smoke. His horse snorted and fought the wind, but Jack kept steady, leaning forward in the saddle. Every drop of rain hissed on the barrel of his rifle. The old church rose out of the dark like a ghost, its steeple broken, windows shattered, roof half caved in. A place long forgotten, except by men like Wade. Jack stopped a few yards away, the horse shifting under him. He dismounted slowly, boots sinking into the mud. Lightning flashed behind him, throwing his shadow across the ruined building. He called out once. Anyone here? Only the echo answered. Then a voice came from the doorway, dry as dust. Always thought you'd die slow, Captain. Jack turned his head slightly, rain sliding off the brim of his hat. Corbin. The man stepped forward into the light, tall, mean-eyed, the kind of grin that came easy to killers. His coat dripped water, and the gun on his hip gleamed wet in the flash of lightning. Wade figured you might come sniffing around. Told me to remind you where you stand. Jack's tone stayed calm. I don't stand with Wade. Corbin laughed low, bitter. You never did know when to mind your own business. Jack's hand hovered near his Colt. Wade's business is rotting this land. Maybe it's time someone cleaned it up. The laughter died. Corbin's smile turned thin. For a heartbeat, the world held still. No wind, no sound, just the wet weight of silence before it breaks. You could still walk away, Jack said softly. No shame in leaving a fight that ain't yours. Corbin tilted his head. Oh, it's mine now. You killed too many chances for that. The guns cleared leather at the same time. The first shot cracked the air wide open, lightning and thunder folding into the same sound. Jack staggered back, a sharp pain tearing through his shoulder. Corbin dropped to his knees, blood spreading through the mud, his breath coming out in broken gasps. Jack's vision blurred, but he stayed upright, guns smoking in his hand. The rain hit harder now, washing red into the dirt. He walked slowly toward the dying man. Corbin looked up at him, eyes wild. You think you'll stop him? Jack's voice was low, steady. No, but I'll make him bleed for what he's done. Corbin tried to speak again, but only blood came out. His hand twitched toward something in the mud, a brass lighter. Jack bent down and picked it up. The metal was worn smooth, initials carved deep into the side. T.C. Tom Callahan. For a long time, Jack just stared at it. The storm roared around him, wind tearing through the weeds, thunder rolling over the plains. His brother's lighter. Here. His throat tightened. Memories flashed. Tom as a boy, laughing, carving his initials into everything he owned. Tom as a young man, idealistic, always chasing something better. And now, maybe, Tom as a ghost somewhere behind Wade's walls. Jack clenched the lighter in his palm until the edges bit into his skin. Guess blood don't wash off easy, he muttered. The sky split open with another flash, and for a second the whole world turned white. The rain carried the smell of gunpowder and mud. Jack looked west, where dark clouds rolled heavy across the plains. All right, little brother, he said under his breath. If that's how it has come, find me. He tucked the lighter into his coat and turned back toward his horse, pain stabbing through his shoulder with every step. The animal whinnied softly, its eyes wide with fear. Jack patted its neck, steadying it. It's all right, boy. We're still breathing. He mounted up and rode into the storm, the wind howling in his ears, the rain mixing with the blood running down his arm. Behind him, the church faded into darkness, another grave swallowed by the land. Somewhere ahead, beyond the sheets of rain and thunder, he could almost see Wade's ranch. He'd been there once, years ago, when the world was cleaner and his brother still smiled easy. Now it stood as a fortress of everything that had gone wrong. Jack pressed a hand to his wound, whispering to himself through clenched teeth. Hold on, Tom. Just hold on. The storm followed him all the way home. The rain came hard that night, cold and endless. The kind that washes everything away, blood, dust, memory. Jack rode through it with one hand pressed tight against his shoulder, the other gripping the reins. His body leaned heavy with pain, but his eyes never closed. Every flash of lightning showed him the road home, and every heartbeat whispered the same name, Tom. By the time he reached the ranch, the storm had swallowed the valley. The barn door slammed against its hinges, and water poured off the roof like a curtain. Clara stood on the porch, holding a lantern against the wind. The moment she saw him, she ran down the steps, her bare feet splashing through the mud. Jack! He barely managed to dismount before his legs gave out. She caught him by the arm, her small hands gripping tighter than they should have been able to. The lantern's light flickered over his face, pale, blood mixing with rain, eyes half closed but still aware. Easy, he muttered, his voice rough. Ain't as bad as it looks. It looks like hell, she whispered back. Come inside. Eliza was already in the doorway when they stumbled in, her face pale with worry. The thunder shook the windows. Clara pulled Jack's coat off, gasping when she saw the wound. God, Jack, he shot you clean through. Just grazed me, he lied. She shot him a look sharp enough to cut through the noise. Don't do that. He gave a faint smile. Do what? Act like pain makes you holy. He winced as she tore a strip from a towel and pressed it to the wound. Her hands trembled, but she kept working, the firelight catching the glint of tears she didn't let fall. Eliza stood in the corner, silent, holding the box like it might still save something. Did you find him? She asked quietly. Jack shook his head. Not Wade, just his dog. Eliza's throat tightened. And Tom. Jack reached into his coat, pulling out the brass lighter. He placed it on the table without a word. The initials caught the light, T.C. For a long time, no one spoke. Only the rain filled the silence. Clara sank into the chair across from him. "It was your brother," she said softly. Jack nodded once. "Seems that way." Eliza's face broke. "Jack, he didn't mean." He cut her off gently, his voice calm but trembling underneath. "I know what a man means when he writes his name next to monsters." Eliza covered her mouth, sobbing quietly. He thought he could outsmart Wade. He said if he played along, he could protect us all. But he was wrong. He was so wrong. Jack leaned back, staring at the fire. His eyes were wet but still steady. Tom always thought the world could be fixed from the inside. Guess some things just rot too deep. Clara spoke softly, her voice fragile but full of truth. Sometimes good men don't survive, try and do good things. Jack looked at her then, really looked. Her face was tired, worn by fear and loss, but her eyes still had something he hadn't seen in a long time. "Mercy, you should rest," he said. "I'm fine. You've been through hell." "So have you," she said. "Difference is I don't hide it behind stubbornness." He almost smiled at that. Guess we all got our ways of not breaking. The storm outside began to ease. The thunder moved farther away, like it was done with them for now. Eliza finally spoke, her voice barely there. "He'll come, Jack. Wade won't let this go." Jack nodded. "I know." Clara's hands tightened on the edge of the table. "Then we run. Tonight. There's still time." Jack looked at her gently, his voice low but unshakable. "You can't outrun a man like Wade. Not forever. And I'm done running." Clara's eyes filled again. "You'll die if you stay." He reached out, resting a rough, warm hand over hers. "Then maybe I'll die doing one right thing." Her lip trembled, but she didn't pull away. For a long moment, they sat like that, the sound of rain softening around them, firelight flickering across faces that had seen too much. When he finally stood, the wound on his shoulder was wrapped, his mind made up. He walked to the door, paused, and looked back. "Lock the doors," he said quietly. "And whatever happens, don't open them till morning." Clara's voice cracked. "Please don't make me watch you walk out again." He hesitated. For the first time, his voice gentled to something almost tender. "You're stronger than you think, Clara." And then he was gone, swallowed by the night, leaving behind two women who understood what that kind of courage really cost. The night broke open again before dawn. The storm had passed, but the sky still wept, soft rain falling steady and slow. Jack rode through the wet dark, his arm burning, his breath shallow. The world around him was silent, as if holding its breath for what was coming. He saw the light from the ranch before he heard the voices. The front door was wide open, swinging in the wind. The horse whinnied softly as he dismounted. He could smell smoke, not from the fire inside, but from gunpowder. "Tom," he called, his voice low, cautious. The shape that stepped out of the doorway made his chest tighten. Tom Callahan looked older than Jack remembered. Eyes sunken, face gaunt, clothes soaked from the rain. His hand gripped a revolver, but his gaze was worse than the weapon. It was hollow. "Jack," Tom said quietly, "you shouldn't have come." Jack's boots sank into the mud as he stepped closer. Wasn't about should. Never was. Tom's fingers trembled around the gun. "You don't understand." "I understand plenty," Jack cut in. "I found your lighter by Corbin's body." Tom flinched, the truth hitting him before the words did. "It wasn't supposed to go that way." "Wait, he said it'd be quick, clean. He said no one would get hurt." Jack's voice stayed calm, but it carried a hurt deeper than anger. "You believed him?" Tom swallowed hard. "I had no choice. He owns everything. The law, the men, the land." Jack stepped closer. "He doesn't own you." Tom's voice cracked. "He did. He still does." For a long moment, neither of them moved. Rain tapped against their hats, slid down their faces. Jack looked at his brother, really looked. The boy who once followed him into every fight, the man who used to say decency was worth dying for. Now all he saw was a shadow of that man. "You could have come to me," Jack said softly. "We could have fixed it." Tom laughed bitterly. "Fixed it? You left, Jack. You ran off to play hero in wars that weren't yours. You don't fix things, you bury them." Jack's eyes dimmed, but he didn't argue. "Maybe, but at least I never sold anyone to the devil to stay warm at night." Tom's face twisted, pain cutting through his anger. "You think I wanted this? You think I don't see their faces every night? His voice broke. I thought if I stayed close to Wade, I could control it. Keep it small. Protect the few I could. But it's too late now. Jack took a slow breath. Then stop it, Tom. Help me end this. Tom's hand shook around the revolver. He'll kill me. Jack's voice softened. He already has. The wind picked up, blowing rain between them like smoke. Tom lowered the gun slightly, his arm trembling. You always were the stubborn one, he said with a faint, broken smile. Still trying to save the world. Jack took another step forward, just trying to save what's left of it. Then came the sound that split silence in two, a single gunshot. For a second, neither of them moved. Then Tom staggered, the revolver falling from his hand. He sank to his knees, blood blooming across his shirt. Jack rushed forward, catching him before he hit the ground. No, Jack breathed, lowering him gently. No, damn it. Tom's breath came shallow, his voice barely a whisper. Being decent, it never saved anyone. Jack's eyes blurred, rain mixing with tears. It saved you now. Tom looked up at him, lips trembling, then smiled faintly. Guess you're still the better man, brother. His chest rose once, then fell still. Jack sat there a long time, holding him, the rain falling soft around them. There were no words left to say, only the sound of water hitting the earth, washing away the blood. When he finally stood, the gun hung loose in his hand, his heart heavy and hollow. He looked toward the north, where Wade's land still waited, dark and untouched. The fight wasn't done, but something inside him was. He turned back toward the house. Through the rain, he could see Clara and Eliza standing in the doorway. Their faces were pale, eyes wide, the lantern light shaking between them. Jack walked toward them slowly, each step heavier than the last. Clara moved first, reaching for him with trembling hands. Jack! He stopped in front of her, soaking wet, his voice raw. It's over. But the look in his eyes said otherwise. Outside, the rain began to fade. The thunder drifted away over the hills, leaving only the soft hum of wind through the grass. Jack looked down at his brother's lighter, still warm in his hand. For the first time in years, he let the tears fall freely. By dawn, the rain had stopped. The plains shimmered under a pale new light, soft and clean, like the land itself was trying to forget the night before. Smoke still rose from the chimney, a thin gray ribbon twisting toward the open sky. Jack sat on the porch, a blanket over his shoulders, the weight of everything pressed deep into his bones. The world was quiet again, that heavy, holy kind of quiet that only comes after a storm. His hand rested on the lighter lying beside him, the initials half faded from the brass. Inside, Clara moved gently around the kitchen, her steps soft against the old floorboards. Eliza sat by the window, silent, eyes red but dry. They'd said little since the gunfire ended. Some griefs didn't need words. They just stayed in the air, heavy and alive. When Clara came out to the porch, she carried a book with her. The spine was cracked, the pages yellowed. She held it out to him. You left this by my bed, she said quietly. Jack looked at it and smiled faintly. Great Expectations. The only book he'd kept from his younger years. Figured it might do better in your hands. She sat beside him, opening it to the first page. You used to read? Once, he said, back when I thought stories were just make-believe. Clara looked out at the horizon, where the wet earth glowed gold under the sun. And now, Jack's voice softened. Now I think they're the only truth left. For a while they just sat there, the breeze moving through the dry grass, carrying the faint smell of rain and ash. Eliza stepped out then, her face pale but steady. She looked older than she had the day before, not by years but by what she'd seen. What will you do now, she asked. Jack stood slowly, his shoulders stiff but healing. There's still work to finish, he said. Eliza frowned. You're not going after Wade. Jack looked down at her, his tone quiet, sure. No, that fight's over. Men like him don't need bullets. They need time. Time makes graves out of every kind of evil. She nodded, tears welling again. Tom loved you, you know. Jack's voice cracked slightly. I know. Just wish loving me hadn't broken him. Clara reached over, her hand brushing his. You can't carry both your sins and his. No one's strong enough for that. Jack gave a small nod, his eyes softening as he watched the light spread across the valley. Maybe not, but I could try to make what's left mean something. He turned to Clara then, his voice gentler than she'd ever heard it. You said you were a teacher once. You should teach again. There are still folks out there who need someone like you. She smiled faintly. And you? What do you need? Jack looked at the rising sun, squinting against it. Just a road, maybe a little peace along the way. He went to the barn, saddled 2 horses, one for her, one for the open road. When he handed her the reins, he placed the book in her hands again. Keep it, he said. Remind yourself that good things don't always stay gone. Sometimes they just wait for morning. Clara's eyes glistened. You not coming with us? He shook his head. I've got miles to ride before I'm done. She nodded slowly, understanding more than he said. Then, before she mounted the horse, she reached out and touched his arm. You did save someone, Jack. Maybe not everyone, but you saved me. Jack smiled, small, tired, but real. Guess that's enough, then. As she and Eliza rode out, the sun climbed higher, burning the mist off the valley. Jack watched them disappear down the dirt road, their silhouettes fading into the light. For a moment, the world felt quiet, alive again. He looked down at the lighter in his hand one last time, then closed it gently and slipped it into his coat pocket. He stepped off the porch, boots sinking into the damp soil, and breathed deep, the smell of clean earth, new rain, and forgiveness. Sometimes being decent didn't change the world, but it changed the few hearts still willing to listen. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Jack saddled his horse, turned toward the open plain, and whispered to no one in particular, All right, Tom. I'm still riding. As he rode out, the wind picked up again, soft and warm, carrying the last echoes of the storm away. The land gleamed gold in the morning sun. And for the first time in a long time, Jack Callahan didn't feel like a man running from his past, but one quietly making peace with it.